In a world that seems increasingly out of control, every once in a while, we hear stories that make us stop and wonder. Stories that confront us with evidence of things we can't see or measure. Stories that seem to pull back a curtain, revealing one who is still in charge. Everyone has faith in something. Brian came to the U.S. as a visitor from India, but he overstayed his visa so he could work and send money back to his struggling family. Later, he was joined by his wife and brother.
I and my wife did file for our legal status. We got approved, but then again for our green card, our permanent residence, we had to file again. There was a lot of money involved in this process, and we were basically just working and paying the lawyers the money. And for some reason or the other, it always used to get denied. We used to appeal, it used to get denied, and this used to take like 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and still we never had a legal status, and it was just going on and going on.
Even though Brian was troubled, he was not without close friends.
I met Brian about 15 years ago. He was working at an Indian restaurant, and he was a waiter there, and he was running the restaurant too. And we became friends because I was attending the restaurant quite a bit.
I got close to one family. He was an Italian, his wife was a Filipino. So we actually grew very close to each other.
When his wife and daughter came to the country, we became family friends. And we started socializing outside of the restaurant and had a kindred spirit together. Brian's one of those guys that's easy to trust. He's a real friend to you.
My wife was carrying my child, in fact, and the child died in the stomach. And after that, the next week, my brother died. And after my brother dying, I was lost completely.
We got even closer after his brother passed away of a heart attack, and we were there together at that time, and the roots went a lot deeper after that.
So it was like one after another things happening, and I never had my papers, so things were getting, real tough. After that, I did a couple of odd jobs here and there, driving the taxi, and then working in the gas stations. Then again, I joined one of my very good friend, his gas station I joined. So I was working with the owners who were Muslims, and they knew I was Christians. But that did not, make any difference for them. I was a person who they could trust. The customers, they knew me by name, in fact, because it was a while I used to work, like I did 5, 6 years. They shared a very close relationship. Whatever house problems they had, they used to come and let me know about it. And in that neighborhood, that basically they say that neighborhood is a crime, lots of crime happening here, there, shootouts. But I never felt that, that fright, something is going to happen to me, because I used to be friendly with everybody over there, in fact.
I did get my work permit and my social, but that also got denied because my sponsor couldn't show sufficient funds. And then my papers went to the court. Saying that as your papers cannot go more ahead, you have to go back to your country, you have to leave.
Yeah, we had gotten a letter that says we were going to get deported. And I mean, my parents really never told me much, not to affect me, because I was like, oh, deported. I was 7th grade, didn't really understand what that meant or anything. So it wasn't like, oh, okay. I thought, oh yeah, we're going to India, that's fun. Haven't seen my grandparents, which my family, that means back to suffering, back to hard work.
So I was in a removal proceedings. That means they would send me back home to India. We used to ask ourselves, why is this happening to us? Why is this happening to us,
And I knew a lot of people said that, you don't have to go back, you can still here, you have 10 years hardship with your children here, you can still live around. But my thing was already in the court. I couldn't. If I go any part of US, they would know with my car insurance or residence or anything that I would have been in trouble. So I said, you know what, I will leave.
Neither they had to change the law or give everybody asylum, or some new law had to come in, and that was nothing which would take place at that very moment.
One day, Brian was working the daytime shift at the convenience store instead of his normal overnight shift.
It was approximately at 10:30 in the night, 10:30 to 10:45. That was a time when I was supposed to get over with my shift. So I was doing all my paperwork and everything. So I was all by myself. So there was one regular customer who I knew him, and he was all by himself. He asked me, he wanted to buy something. So he asked me, can I get this? So at that time, as I told you, I did not consider it a fright that I was, scared of that place because everybody knew me. So I went out. As soon I went out, I opened the door and I went out to open the phone accessories. Suddenly, 3 guys came jetting in and they had guns in their hand. I thought it was a joke because I really never thought that, it was something real happening, it was a robbery. And they turned me around for me to come in the bulletproof where the register is. So as I turned, not doing nothing, they just shot me in the back of my leg. After that, when I gave them the money, I was just praising God. And there was only 3 words I was continuously raising. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. I love you, Jesus. So once I opened both the registers, they caught me by my shoulder and they dragged me because they knew that in the office there was money in that. As they were taking me to the office, I seen a raise on the floor with golden words, Jesus, and I could see it. That was a time basically gave me more of that faith that nothing is going to happen to me, that, oh, Jesus is there with me, and here he is, but still I was telling these words, thank you, Jesus, praise Jesus, I love you, Jesus. I could hear the other person with the gun telling me, give me the money. And that's the time I told him, okay, take the money on the side, because I knew we always kept 100 ones. It was in the drawer. I dragged myself all the way down to the phone, tried to dial 911, but I never knew. The same year, I put the phone in my ear and I could not hear the dial tone. So I was in the impression that there was something wrong with the phone. There was chunks of blood just coming out. Never in my life I seen that chunks just coming out, and I was getting suffocated because I could not breathe. Again, I tried to dial 911. So still I could not hear the dial tone, so I just kept the phone and I just hung my head down and I was just on the ground. And then suddenly one of a customer who I knew, he came in and he looked at me saying, "Oh, Brian, what happened?" So he knew that something wrong has happened because he could see the blood. So suddenly he dialed 911.
Man, I was scared, man. Blood was coming all out of his mouth.
This man doesn't want to be identified after he found the Citgo convenience store clerk shot inside the store. The man says he entered the store to find the clerk alone and injured, and that he'd been shot in the head.
At my position, I was a chief surgery resident at the time. So when a trauma alert comes in, a lot of times if it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill, not too heavy trauma, I let some of the junior residents take care of it for their own experience. I called down there and they say, you know, it's a gunshot wound to the head. So obviously that's a pretty serious injury. That's not something I let the junior residents take care of. So I rush down there and I get down there and I wonder where the guy is. Usually there's a lot of hoopla. Usually everybody's just frantic, trying to get things done, and that just wasn't occurring. And you know, there's this guy in the trauma bay just sitting there, and he looked completely comfortable. We found some blood in his right ear, and he had a wound in his left neck, and he also had a gunshot wound to his leg. But for a gunshot wound to the head, I mean, he shouldn't have. First of all, chances are he probably wouldn't have lived. Second of all, if you get there after a gunshot wound to the head, you're in a bad way. So after we find out that they're stable, we do a slew of tests. We do check labs, just basic labs. We get a plain film of the C-spine, of the cervical spine. We also get a plain film of the chest. Bullets are tricky, they can go anywhere, so you never know. And then after that, we knew it was probably an entry wound to the right ear and an exit wound to the left. There's a lot of important structures in between those 2 points. Because we thought he most likely had an injury, and even if he didn't have an obvious injury, we would need to take him to the operating room to make sure of that, because there are so many structures in between there. If you don't diagnose it and treat it right away, it can be fatal later on.
And then they told me over there that my husband was shot and he's inside the surgery room, and there's no chances of what's going to happen to him because he was shot on his head. He was vomiting chunks of blood and everything.
Bindu was just screaming over the phone. She was really, really upset, and she said, "Brian's been shot."
And my husband got the call and was talking, and his tone was serious.
He had been shot in the leg with a .45, and he'd been shot through the ear and neck with a .45, and apparently he'd lost a lot of blood, and she actually thought he was going to die.
95% of people who are shot in the head will die, and only 2% will live without disabilities. Brian's chances of survival were even lower, since he was shot with a .45, the largest practical handgun caliber in use. A bigger hole means more damage and faster blood loss.
The bullet came in right here, but before it even got to the bone, it actually ducked down into the soft tissue, and it broke the mandible here, so it didn't completely traverse the bone. Now, if it would have done that, if it would have gone up, obviously it would have hit the brain, and that would have either killed him or resulted in pretty significant disability. If it would have gone straight across, his eardrum is right here, and the carotid artery is right there. So we're talking less than an inch. We're talking maybe a centimeter difference between that artery and where the bullet actually ended up going. Fortunate for him, it went down, and even more fortunate for him, it didn't hit any of the important structures in the neck. As it traversed the neck, it would have had to miss his windpipe, it would have had to miss his trachea, it would have had to miss his esophagus, which is directly behind it. Then, behind that, you've got the spinal column. So it missed all three of those structures on the right side, then it went across, and it essentially missed most of those structures on the left side. It barely caught part of his internal jugular vein, but barely caught it. I mean, we did fix it, but if it would have been a very significant injury, he probably would have died from it. When bullets hit solid objects, it causes them to tumble, so a bullet doesn't always go on a straight course. Once it hits something solid, it tumbles, and it can spin like a curveball spins. Fortunate for him, it took a spin, and it spun in his favor. I mean, it could have, with all these structures, it should have hit something.
He said, you know what, Mrs. Fernandez, it's a miracle. I came and saw Brian. He was in a very bad condition, but I didn't think what's going to happen, but I would say it's a miracle.
I saw thousands of traumas when I was at ORMC, and this was a standout.
Because he basically just turned around and just point blank fired at the clerk. And, you know, God had to have been on the clerk's side because it looks like he's going to make it. But, you know, that's the devil at work right there.
She was weak from, I guess, crying all night, but happy and excited that he had survived. He had survived the surgery, which nobody really initially thought he would.
She had many people that were praying for him that night.
It was like the dark night with a bright morning, and that morning was the best morning in my whole life because I got my husband back. Yeah.
We actually left to see him the next day when she called us and said he made it.
We were already planning on coming down for the kids' spring break within a couple of days. So we just pulled the kids out of school.
It was like a second reason that became our main priority at that time. We've got to get down there.
Later on that evening, we arrived in Orlando and we went to look for Brian in the hospital. But there wasn't anybody registered under his name in the hospital because he was shot. The people who shot him were still unaccounted for.
So after getting through to Bindu on the phone, we kind of crept to the right area. And
my wife and I wanted to bring the kids. We wanted them to see this miracle in action.
When we got there, we were just kind of grossed out and didn't really want to look at him. We're like afraid of what we would see. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I was walking through the hallway. I was like all nervous. I'm like, okay, let's do this. And I was like all nervous. But when I saw him, it didn't seem like he was speaking.
You expect to see, you know, just so much awfulness in front of you. And even though there was that aspect, it was like his warm smile was still there.
I just couldn't believe that he didn't have any real problems. I said, Brian, are you able to hear me out of your ear? Your bad ear where you got shot? He goes, yes.
He had bandages. There was a lot of swelling around his neck. I remember seeing that. Tubes coming out, you know, just kind of draining, a lot of drainage. And he looked tired, just really tired, still groggy. To see that firsthand and to see the evidence of God's hand immediately, it's just surreal.
For about a week or so, I never even got to go to the hospital to see my dad because he was in the critical care, and then I had my sisters, and we can't all go together, so I had to stay home for a while. Seeing your dad on the bed and he's in pain, it's really not, you know, good because he's had a heart attack before. He suffered so much. You know, he was just he was like in pain, so it was really hard to see him like that. And so it was really hard because I really love my dad, and then knowing that I could almost lose him really scared me. So it was really scary.
I was in the hospital 11 days. So after that, I was discharged. It was like my kids, Dad has come home, Dad has come home, doing the bed, doing the cot, you don't do this, you don't do that.
I said, Brian, are you in any pain? He says, no. I said, are you not taking any pain medicine or anything? I think he said he took Advil.
Just, you know, that's just for the pain, you know, if I get some pain, but I'm not having. Because praise God, there's no pain. After this incident taking place, 2 months, I had good rest. I stayed with my family. And after that, I thought, as I'm okay, let's get back to work.
He was excited to go back to that neighborhood and tell everybody I'm alive, and he was very proud that, you know, Jesus gave him a new life. But at the same time, when he told me he's going to go back to that gas station, I was a bit scared. I won't lie to you.
Oh no, don't do that. You know, they're going to come back again. They're going to shoot you, and that's not the right place. You be in the house or you work somewhere else, but I'm not going to send you over there. So I just told her one thing. I said, what they had to do, they did. And God saved me. So I don't think so anything more than that. What more than that they can do?
So we all said for him to go, but yet we were really scared.
When I went back to work, no doubt there was 4 guys. 3 were caught, and the 4th, the main shooter, was not caught. He was out on the streets. But still, there was no fright. I went to the place and I started telling my testimony. Whoever came, and all my customers were so happy seeing me. And it was like overnight, I became something like, hey, that's the miracle man.
When I met Brian, he was actually in immigration court in what we call removal proceedings, which means that the government was attempting to remove him from this country. And the reason he came to me is that he was looking for what we attorneys call some sort of relief from removal or deportation. There is a very, what I would call, a rare type of visa that is available. The purpose behind the U visa, the reason that it's out there, is for the U.S. government to be able to know that their witnesses are going to be available for them when they are prosecuting the criminals. And they don't want the witnesses deported, so they can't be in a criminal courtroom. So if you are a victim of a horrendous crime, but either the perpetrators will never be found, or the perpetrators have already been convicted, and by the time you come to see me, it's already been said and done, you're probably not going to be able to get that visa. And then you have to have the local authorities wanting to assist, in this case, Brian, by signing an affidavit declaring that they need him and they need him to stay in this country. It was a long process and a difficult process for him, because even though we filed the application, just filing the application does not remove him from immigration court. He had to be approved before the court would dismiss his case. And again, we needed some sort of relief. So this was the form of relief we were after, and the judge gave us the opportunity to go forward with it. As it turned out, this is a rare visa, as I said before, but it's one that, because of his circumstances, not only worked for him, but it worked for his wife, and I know that it worked for his daughter as well. So,
yes, no doubt something bad happened, but that bad happened for something good, because otherwise there was just no way I and my family could stay behind.
We never had our papers, and this was the reason God never wanted us to go back home. So he made this way for us to live back in US. But more than these papers, I think Brian was back with me. That was more important, because I can live anywhere in this world. I don't want that visa more than him. If he is there, he is the visa to live. Mommy, please, it's not you that really. I cannot smile.
I've already forgiven day one when they shot me. All 4 of them who was involved, who shot me, I had already forgiven them through my heart. And I would like them to ask forgiveness from God, because God loves them too. No doubt they have done something which they were not supposed to do, but I know it was their hand, but it was the work of the devil who was doing something bad to them.
That scar symbolizes a soldier wound. When veterans, they get scars. Scars show you what happened to your life. It shows you the past. So that wound that my dad has reminds me that my dad's a soldier for God.
I think that scar remains on his neck it's something which will always make me remember that Jesus is alive.
So I'm really thankful, and I'm thankful for God who gave my dad back, because without him, I'm not sure where I would be. I would just be crazy, because my dad is he's our foundation of our family. He's the main person in our family, and I love my dad a lot.
Marianella was a graduate student. When her school announced a mission trip to China, she wanted to go, but didn't have the money.
And that's when I decided to go to my professor and my supervisor and ask for 1 week off so I can go work and do this literature evangelism. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's knocking on doors and sharing Christian books and health book material. So I went ahead and went with a group to Georgia.
So it was really nice to have her along in the trip with us, that she had done it before and she could help us out.
Those who were new, like me, this was my first time, we would get a bit more coaching on how to approach houses. If somebody really shut the door in our faces, don't take it personally, just keep your hopes up, keep praying.
A good day was selling 10 books. That's over $100 a day. An excellent, superb day was selling 20 books a day. That's over $200. I knew that to accomplish the $3,000 that I needed for the trip, I would have to sell at least double. And I only had that week to work. We gathered together in a circle. I remember holding hands with all the other colporteurs and the leader. And right before we prayed, we each said what our goal was.
So the very first day when we got there, Marianella was like, well, my goal today, Lord, is 40 books.
The 40-book goal was really a high goal, because it's really rare for somebody to sell that many.
I kind of looked at her because I'm not a really firm believer for that high expectations. So I didn't think she was actually going to get it.
I was in the van with the rest of the colporteurs and started going door to door, and I remember my bag was full of books. And all of a sudden I was starting to sell in sets of 5, and then sets of 3, and sets of 4.
Then throughout the day, you could hear through the walkie-talkie saying, this is a bit of a jargon, that we need more bread, as in more books.
And then when we're in the van and we're pulling, back to our little command center, I asked Marianella, well, how many did you get? And she got 41. And I was just floored. Everybody in the van was floored.
She actually sold 41 books because one of the other girls had prayed that she sells 1 book over what her goal was.
But then the next day she said, well, if God can do this many, then he can do 10 more.
He came through, so you know what? When it was my turn, I said 50 books.
And again, I need more bread, I need more books, I need more books. I need to be dropped off in another territory because I finished these houses. And at the end of the day, she met her goal.
And so then Marianella, all smiley, comes along and says, hey guys, I met my quota, I met my 50 books.
I said, well, if God blessed me with 41 books the first day, and then the second day with 50 books, what's another 10 books?
The third day, she said, I want to sell 60 books. You gotta help me sell 60 books.
Well, when I heard Marianella say 60, I was just floored. And, the one thing that was going through my head was Jacob, whenever he struggled with the Lord. And he said, I will not let you go until you bless me.
And the same through the phone. You hear, I need more bread, I need more bread, I need more books.
60 books is over $600 a day, plus donations. It was about $800 that day that God blessed me with. Every night when I saw the miracle of God, how he was giving me exactly the goals I had asked for, and even more with donations, I just rejoiced in him, and I could only praise him throughout the night.
And Marianella then set another goal for 70 books. That's a high calling.
I said, well, if God's given me 41 books the first day, 50 books the second day, 60 books the third day, what's 70 books to God? That's only 10 more.
70 books is a lot to sell. And she asks the same prayer of God.
Is she really going to be able to pull this off? But in the back of our minds, we thought, well, it's not her. It's going to be Christ pulling it off for her.
And she sold them. She sold 70 books. It's really, really unbelievable that it's a huge amount in one day.
I thought it was amazing that she was getting all of these books, that she was able to meet so many people and they were all receptive to what she was saying.
Peace Above the Storm, it gives you 13 steps on how to find freedom from worry, guilt, and fear in your life.
It's the fact that she had that kind of trust in God. And it was very obvious that she prayed for miracles to happen, and they did.
4 days in a row, Marianella sold the exact number of books she prayed for, a grand total of 220 books, and more than $3,000 of earnings.
Nobody could question the fact that the Lord had led in her life, and for her to be able to go to China.
Although she was seeing a doctor for high blood pressure, Gladys was healthy and happily married. On Good Friday in 2010, everything seemed normal, except Gladys was up much later than usual.
There I am, sitting in the living room, talking to my friend on the phone.
Usually, she's not awake. She's already sleeping before 10 o'clock, and it was 11:30 at nighttime.
If you have heard God's voice before, you know when He's talking to you. I was 100% sure that God told me to go to ER.
I'm gonna call you back.
I just told my husband to take me to ER without having any pain of any kind.
I saw her that she looked fine to me. She didn't look sick or anything. So maybe inside of me, and sometimes I think about maybe inside of me, I was kind of anxious at the same time. But then as I was looking at her for a while, she seemed kind of serious and she got a little loud. She said, take me to ER.
I know there's been a bunch of times where we could have all easily just been like, it's okay, just, get some sleep or take something. But for some reason, we sensed it. We sensed something. We just like, yeah, we gotta go.
And we're driving and I'm telling my husband, don't stop on any yellow lights. About a minute away from the hospital, I started getting this big pain. Jerry, my husband, took me into the room. We tried to register ourselves there, and things were not working out fast enough for me because my head just started to explode. I told them to please give me a chair because I just felt that I had to sit down because it's like my legs were weak and I just felt really as if I was going to pass out. They brought me a chair and all of a sudden I just told them I'm going to throw up. So they got me this bucket and I threw up like crazy. When they saw that I was throwing up and this pain was just exploding in my head, and they wheeled me into the emergency room to put me into the machine for a CT scan.
I stayed quiet about it. I just didn't want to hear anything bad that was going to happen. And then I just was pacing back and forth and not knowing what to do.
When they got me out of there, then all the doctors and the nurses, they all got together to talk about what they found and what they were planning to do.
When we went to where you were at the room there, and you had so many things on you and stuff that to check your heart, and the brain waves and all that. And I didn't even want to ask what was wrong with you. I was afraid to ask. I remember I was afraid to ask because I didn't want to hear bad news about it.
I remember that she told Jerry, this is serious.
We got a phone call from the emergency room And I was informed by the doctor on call that one of my patients had checked into the hospital, and then they told me the story. She had an aneurysm that was rupturing, and she developed a subarachnoid bleed. Now, the chances of somebody surviving that is maybe 1 in 1,000. When it ruptures, the blood gets into your cerebrospinal fluid, and then you get permanent damage. And once it starts bleeding, you generally cannot save anybody.
But they were trying to decide which way to take me to Florida Hospital in Orlando South, if by ambulance or by helicopter. To tell you the truth, I mean, my fear of heights and my fear of flying is really, really, really bad. And since I have such a big phobia of flying, I just asked, why the helicopter? And she said, oh, because in a helicopter it only takes you from 5 to 7 minutes. This peace that I had in my heart, I mean, I was not even concerned about anything. I was just relaxed, which I am so, it's like I'm shocked. And I just looked at the city of Orlando, and it looks so beautiful. They wheeled me into the hospital, and from then on, I don't recall anything else.
Aneurysms are like a blister on a blood vessel or a bubble on a tire. And in particular, they involve the arteries of the brain. A gradual buildup is not what typically occurs when an aneurysm ruptures. When an aneurysm ruptures, it's just bang, right out of the blue. And what happens when an aneurysm bleeds is that the pressure in the head gets so high that no blood goes to the brain. That usually results in death or permanent disability. If the patient remains alive after the initial bleeding, then they get attention and we diagnose and work them up. So like in Gladys's case, her aneurysm had already ruptured when it was discovered. And so at that point, it has a very high chance of bleeding again. She has a lot to gain by being evaluated and treated quickly.
I wasn't even all the way afraid yet. I was more like trying to comprehend what was going on. Like I didn't understand what was going on.
This is meant to be an artery or blood vessel in the brain. And here, hanging off the back, is a bubble that shouldn't be there. So it really does look like a bubble on a tire. So with coiling, it's all treated from inside the blood vessel. We get into the blood vessel down in the groin. Here we've drawn another picture with a similar aneurysm. And now inside the blood vessel is a tube, and that's meant to represent a catheter. We put that into the aneurysm, and then through that catheter we put in pieces of wire that gradually fill up the aneurysm. And the goal of the procedure, like we said before, is to prevent the aneurysm from bleeding again, and the way to do that is to put in as many coils as we can. In general, the risks of treating an aneurysm the major risks are stroke or death.
After they told us that the procedure was going to take place the next day, what they would have to do, when we went back home, then I actually felt it hit me. I started getting really depressed and stuff.
And my sons, they were really there. I know what they were going through themselves. They were silent. They couldn't express anything. But I know inside of them, they were afraid of something was going to happen.
I kind of dwelled on the same similar thoughts over and over again. Just like, am I going to lose her?
Saturday, I have no recollections of anything that happened. The next thing that I remember is Sunday morning, Easter. My husband was by my side. He was kissing my forehead. And I think that his kisses were the ones that woke me up. The first time that the Dr. Hellinger walked into the room, the first thing after he said his name was,
"You're lucky to be alive. You almost died."
But the thing is that it was not only Dr. Hellinger that said that. every other doctor that came in also said the same thing. It's like, wow. You know, I was still in a shock for a while. It took me a long time. I could not believe what was happening to her. Anytime a nurse or a doctor came into the room, I was expecting something negative about her results because she was always getting a lot of different tests. And one of the nurses that came in, she said, your wife is going to be here for a while. It's going to be weeks, even months.
Sick patients, and the majority of patients are sick, meaning they come to us with neurological deficits. It's not uncommon for patients to be in the hospital for several weeks to several months and then go through a long rehabilitation process.
Thinking that she was going to be more than 30 days or maybe 2 months, it was too much for me to even handle. So I had to come home. And just because I didn't want to accept that she was there. But the problem is when I came home and I went to the bedroom, you know, she's not there. But knowing that she was not there and I couldn't see that, I had to go to the family room and sleep in the family room, turn the TV on or something, you know, to get away from, because I was in shock really. I'm just gonna block it. This is just a nightmare, this is a dream. I'm gonna wake up and find out that this was only a dream. Sometimes I will blame myself for different situations that happened to her. You know, that maybe I was not a good husband. I was losing faith in God. And one thing he told me, I've always been with you. You know, I was asking God, please, I don't want to see her there so many days and weeks, because every time I go to ICU, there's so many people. When I pass through there, I'm going through difficult situations. Some are dying there. You know, to me, it felt like just going there every day. It felt like months going there. It was just so difficult. Each day was so difficult. But one thing I did was, well, you know, God, I just want to leave it up to you. I'm not going to think ahead of what's going to happen. I'm just going to think about now that she's alive. And I'll believe that, you know, you're going to work it out. She was in ICU for about 2 weeks. Then she was transferred to a regular room. And just as I came in, a doctor comes in and he says, you're leaving tomorrow. And I said, what, leaving tomorrow where, to another room or what? You know, I said, no, you're going home. And so I asked the doctor, wait a minute, you sure about this? She's only been here like 2 weeks almost, and she's already leaving? And then the doctor goes, you know, humorous way, and saying, well, you want me to, we can keep her longer if you want, you know, several months. He said, no, that's okay, doctor, you know.
How's everything, Gladys? Pressure, how's your pressure doing now?
When the doctor, the cardiologist, Dr. Bajar, when he was going through the papers, and the papers were about this thick, and he was just looking and looking, and I was looking at his eyes as if he was really shocked. And amazed what was going on. While he was looking and I was trying to see what was going on, that if he saw something bad happening or something, but these were all the results from the hospital. So then he said, listen now, I'll be back. I want to bring my staff so they can look at this. And a few seconds later, he comes back with his staff. He says,
she's a living miracle. The chances of a patient like this being alert herself to realize that there was something terribly wrong, showing up at the right time, just when the aneurysm was rupturing, to be diagnosed, air evacuated, to work for all these things to work perfectly, and she not suffer any damage and come out alive, is more than a miracle.
I believe God kept her awake for a reason, because if she would have gone to bed early, she probably would not have survived it.
This stage of mind that I was there listening but not reacting, listening but not feeling, it's like, wow, God, you are doing this because you love me, because you know that if you let me go through if you allow me to react to all of these things that I'm hearing and seeing the doctors and they're concerned, it's like, I don't think that I would have made it. Me, by nature, I'm anxious. By nature, I am trying to solve my own problems, you know.
Yes, I know.
Hey. By nature, I am a person that wants to be in control.
Yes, I know. I love my wife more than ever before. You know, it's like, it's amazing. It's like we started dating again.
Yes,
you know, as you know, I don't call her like my wife. It's like my girlfriend, you know. And as a matter of fact, we did something great too. We renewed our vows, and we had a ceremony. We had a wedding, and all your brothers and sisters were there. Our friends,
they came from all over
different
the United
places
States,
came. You know, to share that moment with us. It was a celebration, not only being together for 32 years, but also God giving you life. To me, that celebration was for you.
Easter Sunday, that day now has a very special day for me, now twice special. The resurrection of Jesus, and at the same time, I feel like I was resurrected too, because God had given me life one more time.
My parents noticed that I wasn't really making eye contact with them anymore. You know, how you smile at your baby, you know, you think your baby will smile back and respond. I wasn't doing those things. I was born into a very normal family. I had an older brother. I was born a healthy baby. One afternoon, after my parents were giving someone a ride home from church, we got into a very bad car accident. I was thrown from my mother's arms. My head hit the dashboard. Had a very bad head injury, and as a result, I was diagnosed with glaucoma, and I lost my sight at 12. My parents began to ask God for a miracle, and they took me to the pastor and had me anointed. They fasted, and as you can see, I'm still blind. I believe that someone who prays and asks for a miracle, and if they didn't get it the way that they were expecting, you know, that's an opportunity for them to be stretched. So I began to consider my life, and, you know, I said that I had an older brother. He taught me all kinds of things, you know, but there was a certain side of his life that was not necessarily good either. And unfortunately, he got himself mixed up in the wrong company and got himself killed at a very early age. Had it not been for the Lord intervening, I may have ended up in a very similar situation. I believe our stories would probably be the same. And so I look at my blindness now as being a blessing and not a curse. You know, blindness for me was definitely not a disability in my mind, but socially, it definitely caused some problems until I found music. After I found music, a lot of the awkwardness that I dealt with socially fell away. And so I decided, well, it just came to me like, wow, okay, this is the way I'm going to make my mark.
But it helps to know that you are near. Jesus, walk with
Well, while I was in college, I met a guy who wanted to invest in my career, and his mission was to turn me into a household name. He wanted to break me out of the box and make me into the next Stevie Wonder.
He had come from the University of Miami, where he graduated from their music school. He had played out in the world. You know, he had written songs that Gladys Knight recorded. He had, you know, been around a lot of people.
I met someone that was opening up a nightclub on South Beach that was owned and operated by celebrities, and they would have these big celebrities that would come in this club every night or so. This is the kind of place that Patti LaBelle, Oprah Winfrey, Mike Tyson. Had the opportunity to meet Mike Tyson several times. He would come in there. A lot of high-profile people would come in there, and I was the music.
I could find so much joy.
I decided, well, I'm going to leave the secular scene and do it for the Lord. And it really wasn't that easy because nobody really in the Christian market knew who I was, and I had to figure out again how I was going to make my mark. Because see, at that point I still thought it was about me.
When I first met Neville, one of the things that impressed me about him so much and really made me want to help him was he was working like 3 jobs.
Yes,
he was
yes.
teaching at like 3 different schools. He would get up in the morning. I think he had to leave at get up at like 5 in the morning to catch public transportation to get to these schools, and wouldn't get home until I think 7, 8, 9 o'clock, may have been later than that every night. And he was doing that as his full-time work and then trying to do the ministry on the side. He wasn't trying to accept governmental assistance. He wasn't trying to take an easy way out. And if anybody had a reason to give up, it was Neville, okay? If you're blind, everything is 10 times harder.
So I took care of myself. I did my own laundry. I cleaned my own apartment. I had my clothes organized in my closet.
This is Neville.
I said, Neville, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm vacuuming. Now, I'm sitting there in my mind picturing, how does a blind person vacuum? Do they know what they've even gone over? But yet, that spoke a lot to me. Neville was living by himself in an apartment down in South Florida, and yet he cared enough about basic things like that he would be vacuuming to clean his apartment before the weekend began.
Leaning up on a Friday afternoon.
When you're not playing in the club and you can get a free complimentary meal, or you don't have the money to stretch like that. So I called my mother. I said, Mom, how do you cook rice? And so I did exactly what she said, and voila, I was like, wow, I have rice. This is exactly how I learned to cook.
I'm gonna put a little vegetable oil in here. Man, I feel like I'm on the cooking channel, man.
His potato salad was, and I don't think my grandmother would be watching this, but it's better than hers. And I mean, I was like, wow, this man can really, really cook.
I made this dish for her several times. That's why I love him. Now she does all the cooking in the house. I'm spoiled. That's why I love him. 'Cause you can't find nobody like the God I serve. Well, hopefully my wife didn't change around the seasonings. That's why I praise him. That's the curry right there. That's why I praise him. That's why he's my all in all. My King of Kings, my Lord of Lords. He's good. He's good. He's good. Hallelujah. Sweeter than the honey and the honey.
But I'm gonna make some Caribbean dumplings as well.
When my son first met Neville, he said, how can someone like you that can't see, how can you cook and do all of these things? And Neville told him, he said, Christopher, you can do anything that you want to do. He said, if you trust in God and you believe in yourself and believe that you can do anything that you put your mind to, you can do it.
And the sea turns to dry land when all confidence gives way to fear. Who shall?
He takes it to a whole nother level. You can hear these other singers and their voices, and you say, man, they're really good. And then Neville opens his mouth, starts singing, you say, whoa.
Are you faithful to all his commands? Are you one with him?
But he sang at the White House, he sang at Carnegie Hall. There are not many people that ever get to sing at Carnegie Hall. And so then we go from those engagements back to little tiny churches where there was, a handful of people there. We were late for a flight one time at the airport, and we were rushing to get to it, and we happened to see an airport worker, a flight attendant or something, walking along, and we asked her where the gate was. She told us where it was, and we said, thanks, and we took off running. But she stopped us, and she said, but wait, he can't go on the flight. And we said, well, what do you mean? We got tickets, we're late for the flight. She said, he's been drinking, he can't go on the flight. And I said, he's not drunk, he's blind.
When I see Neville, I don't see a blind person. I don't see someone with limitations. I see a normal, beautiful person.
You know, I do believe that the greatest miracles sometimes are not the most visible miracles.
Because I think a lot of people who would probably be in Neville's shoes, they would just shrink. They would just give up. They would hold their hands up and say, I can't take this. But to be able to get up every day and to say, Lord, I'm thankful for what I have. I love my family. I love what I'm doing for you, even though there are challenges and there are struggles. I think that's the greatest miracle, just to be able to know that what you're doing affects so many people that are around you.
There's no anger at God. There's no, why me attitude, feel sorry for myself.
God is able to reach anyone in any situation, no matter the circumstances, and take a bad situation and make it good. And sometimes that good situation doesn't always mean that the person will be healed.
It's a miracle that there's always been a peace and an acceptance of I'm okay being blind. It's okay. And he really means it.
Let me take the time to tell you what I've seen. I've seen prayers being answered immediately. Then there are times when the waiting seems infinitely long, and weak and fainting hearts receive strength to be strong. That's a miracle. It's a miracle, the kind that happens every day in a personal and special way. It's a miracle, I say it's a miracle. It's the kind that is too obvious for everyone to see. And the greatest miracle of all is happening to me.
The Bible says, every eye shall see him. That includes blind eyes too.
There aren't many things of which we can be sure, but let me give you evidence you can't ignore. I was a prisoner to my former life of sin, but freedom came my way one day, and now I'm born again, and that's a miracle. It's a miracle, the kind that happens every day in a personal and special way. It's a miracle, I say it's a miracle. It's the kind that is too obvious for everyone to see. And the greatest miracle